Today we're going to read Grace Hopper, Queen of the Computer Code. It's written by Laurie Wallmark and illustrated by Katie Wu. So here on this first page, they just kind of describe some things about Grace. Software tester, workplace jester, order seeker, well-known speaker, gremlin finder, software minder, clever thinker, longtime tinker, cherished mentor, ace inventor, avid reader, novel reader, rule breaker, chance taker, troublemaker, amazing Grace. You'll learn about her here in just a few short seconds, and she really is a pretty amazing woman. Grace leaned back in her chair and yawned. Once again, she had worked far into the night writing computer code. Grace's latest computer program was one to guide Navy missiles, and it was almost complete. All that was left to check was her work. Grace reviewed the code line by line, making sure she hadn't made any mistakes. When she finished, Grace set down her pencil and frowned. The last section of her program, a bit of code that multiplied numbers, looked familiar. She checked back through her work and found she had written that same code before, over and over again. So here you can see she's working. Over here you can notice on this stack of papers it says top secret. Grace snorted. What a colossal waste of time. There had to be a better way. So why not make the computer do the work? Computers were good at doing boring jobs. And here she said, I was lazy as all get out. I never wanted to do anything over again. So she figured out a way to store pieces of a program like her multiplication code inside the machine. And when she needed to use that code in another program, all Grace had to do was tell the computer where to find it. The computer then joined together the many bits of code into one computer program that no one had ever done before. Grace was the first. Even as a child, Grace loved to tinker with gadgets and learn new ideas. She wanted to understand how things worked so she could make them better. And when Grace was 7, she unscrewed the back of her alarm clock and took a peek. She reached in and doing! Out popped a spring, followed by several gears. One rolled across the floor and another under her bed. Grace scooped up the parts and tried to put them back together, but no matter which piece she put where, she couldn't get that clock to run. So Grace was a very curious child. So those of you that are curious, use that curiosity to make things better and learn new things. She needed another clock so she could study one that still worked. So Grace sprinted from room to room, clock by clock. She fiddled with gears and springs and levers and pins. She arranged them this way and that way. 7 clocks later, 7-year-old Grace understood what made a clock tick. And when Grace's mother discovered the many jumbles of clock parts scattered around the house, all she could do was laugh. After all, Grace was just being Grace. So here you can see it over here and then over here. But she finally got a clock to work. That's pretty impressive for a 7-year-old. Once Grace figured out how clocks worked, she moved on to bigger challenges. She followed a complicated blueprint, one that was a blueprint and constructed a dollhouse made of stone. But there were no stairs, so how could her dolls get to the top floor? Here we've got a few little notes. It says, if you've got a good idea and you know it's going to work, go ahead and do it. Not a problem for junior engineer Grace. She opened her toy construction kit and laid everything out that she would need. Nuts, bolts, metal pieces, and an electric motor. It took some experimentation, but Grace figured it out. Now her dolls had an elevator to go upstairs. Grace delighted in learning difficult concepts, the harder the better. While her schoolmates wore frilly dresses and learned to be young ladies, Grace studied math and science, and her bedroom overflowed with books and science equipment. She raced through her high school classes and finished 2 years early. Grace couldn't wait to start college. More classes, more learning, more fun. And one day her college entrance grades arrived, and Grace's hands just trembled as she ripped open the envelope and proudly read aloud to her parents the many high marks in math and science. But when she reached the grade for Latin, Grace fell silent. She had failed. She failed Latin. Without Latin, Grace couldn't go to college. And without college, Grace couldn't be a mathematician. And without math, Grace just couldn't be Grace. Grace waved to her classmates as they all left for college without her. Nothing would stop her from joining them next year. She held her head high and returned to her studies, working hard. And Grace even conquered Latin. And at the end of the year, she passed all her exams. So here you can see where she opened it up and it had an F on it. And then here you can see where she didn't let that stop her. She just kept working harder and harder. With her trunks packed and her math books in hand, Grace left for Vassar College, an all-women's school. Some of her classmates took classes called Husbands and Wives and Motherhood, but not Grace. Her favorite subjects were math and physics. So there you can see. She's off to college, finally. All her hard work paid off. Grace did more in college than just study. Whenever there was fun or adventure to be found, she was always first in line. Her personal motto was dare and do. When a barnstormer came to town offering plane rides, Grace rushed in to sign up. She pulled herself up into the seat behind the pilot and adjusted her goggles. With a deafening roar of the propeller, she sputtered into action. The biplane rattled across the field and lifted off. With each loop-de-loop through the air, Grace's grin grew wider and wider. So here you can see she is taking a plane ride. And it says, I squandered all my money. It cost $10. And I went up in a plane. I'm sure to her, that was the best $10 she ever spent. Because of Grace's hard work and intelligence, the other students respected her abilities. They often came to her for help with their studies. One day, her fellow students entered the room only to see a bathtub filled to the brim with water. Grace invited a volunteer to step into the tub, clothes and all. Water sloshed over the edges and flooded the floor, and the students all burst into laughter. Grace explained the reason for this tidal wave. The volume of the student's body pushed out the same volume of water. The results? One soggy student, all wrapped in a towel, and one math lesson never forgotten. So here, she was teaching the students about volume. That was pretty creative. But like she said, one they never forgot. When Grace moved on to graduate school at Yale University, there was only one woman in her class. This didn't bother Grace in the least. Grace wanted to share her passion for math, so she took a job teaching at Vassar College. Her classes were always both practical and fun. Even though Grace loved teaching, America was now at war and needed the best mathematicians to design weapons. Patriotic Grace wanted to help her country, so she tried to enlist in the Navy. And that proved to be a little bit of a problem. So down here it says, our young people are the future. We must provide for them. So here she realized the importance of teaching the younger generation, which is you guys right now, because you will be the future of our country. So based on the Navy's requirements for new recruits at that time, Grace was just too old and too skinny to enlist. She was 36 and weighed only 105 pounds. Grace could be very persuasive, however. It took her more than a year, but Grace convinced the Navy that they needed her. So over here it says, faithfulness in all things. My motto is, you see, the world will be a better place when all agree with me. So that's pretty impressive. So if you guys are listening here, she didn't get into college the first time, so she had to work an extra year to try and get in. And then in this situation, the Navy said, nope, sorry, you're too old. So for another year, she tried to get in and she was persistent. So just because things don't happen quickly doesn't mean they're not going to happen. So if there's something that you feel like is important that you need to do, you need to keep working towards it. Because of her superior math skills, Grace was assigned to work programs for one of the first computers ever built, the Mark I. Only a few people had ever programmed before, so she had to learn how to do it all on her own. One late summer day, a coworker burst into Grace's office. The new computer, the Mark II, had stopped working. She gasped, "This has never happened before, not with any of her programs." So Grace thought it had to be a prank. After all, she did love playing jokes on her coworkers, so maybe the engineers were getting their revenge. But they weren't this time. The computer, it really wasn't working. So here you can see they all went in to research together and figure out why did it stop working. For hours, Grace and her team reviewed the code, but couldn't find no error. It was as if the green ceramic gremlin that always sat in Grace's office had come to life and sneaked into the machine and made a mistake. What is it? Well, maybe the problem wasn't in her program. Maybe it's in the actual computer. So Grace jumped to her feet and hurried down the hall. The immense computer room usually thrummed with a click of metal switches and the whir of paper tape. But today, everything was silent. So here she has another saying, "I have insatiable curiosity. It's solving problems. Every time you solve a problem, another one shows up behind it. That's the challenge." That's a good perspective to have. Because today, you might solve a problem, but not long after, there's going to be another one for you to solve. So it keeps your mind sharp. Grace and her team searched everywhere for the problem. Grace used her pocket mirror to check inside the machine. She angled it in this way and in that. No matter where the engineers looked, they didn't see anything wrong. No loose wires or stray sparks. Not even a naughty gremlin. The engineers were stumped. They had checked everything. What could be causing this problem? And then someone saw it. A moth was trapped inside, blocking a switch from working properly. So here you can see them all kind of looking through this window of this big, large computer. But if you look really closely over here, they then realized a moth had gotten caught in the machine and it was stopping one of the switches from working right. And one of the engineers borrowed Grace's eyebrow tweezers and removed the dead moth. The computer started up again with no problem. Being good scientists, Grace and her team taped the moth into the logbook to record their unusual finding. They added a note, the first actual case of a computer bug being found. Ever since then, because of Grace's sense of humor, computer glitches have always been called bugs. So here you can see, and she writes, the first actual case of a bug being found in a computer. Early computers didn't understand letters or words, only programs filled with lines and lines of ones and zeros. As Grace worked on a brand new computer called the UNIVAC 1, she thought about ways to make programming even easier. Not everyone was comfortable thinking in numbers as she, and Grace wanted anyone to be able to use computers, not just scientists and engineers. Grace glanced at the wall clock and she had rigged to run it backwards. It reminded her to use her imagination. Unconventional thinking was often a key to solving problems. To allow her brain a chance to consider new ideas, Grace took a break from programming. She doodled cartoons of gremlins and dragons and other fantastical creatures, and here she's saying humans are allergic to change. They like to say, "We always done it this way," and then try to fight that. While she drew, she asked herself questions. Should people have to learn a computer language? Why couldn't computers learn people language? They could. So Grace invented a program that let people use words to tell the computer what to do. Her program, called Flowmatic, included simple English commands like multiply. Flowmatic translated multiply and other commands into instructions the computer could understand. This was much easier than programming pages of ones and zeros. With the help of Grace's program, she and her coworkers were able to write code more quickly and with fewer errors. So over here she said, let people write their programs in English. It was only common sense. When Grace was 60 years old, the Navy forced her to retire. They said that she was too old to serve. And here she says, it was the saddest day of my life. Within a few months, they realized their mistake and had asked her to return for a short 6-month assignment. This short assignment lasted for 20 more years. Grace, now an admiral, finally retired from the Navy for the second time at age 80. For almost 50 years, Grace Hopper, the queen of the computer code, dedicated her life to solving computer problems. So there you can see Grace as an older lady. And here she said, no wonder people called her Amazing Grace. Yep, the end.